to ask if you want to join a renew, right? And
Yeah,
you've sent £13 over.
extra.
Oh, but hang on a minute. If it
Make it
hang
up
on,
to 50 because you said you needed some donations.
yeah, we do. But Anne, the last time when I went to school, the membership is £35 a year, and if you add 13 to £35 a year, that's £48, not 50.
Oh, I thought it was 37.
Well,
Oh,
and
God.
I appreciate it. You therefore made a donation of 15 quid.
Only
Right,
because
okay. We're fully on it now. And I'm gonna make Richard a host as well. Oh, and I got some Barry news for people, right? Which is great. So we are officially started now, and I may be fiddling around in the background because I got to send something over to Ruth, i.e., I got to put the YouTube thing on to Ruth, right? But so let me do that a minute. Whilst I'm fiddling about with that, I want to know, other than us discussing sick last night in the discussion, the dinosaur remains they found the sick from a dinosaur, which was 66 million years old from a Cretaceous period, right? It's the weirdest image ever. Look it up, right? Other than that, Goff, have you got any news?
No.
Sick last night in okay, that's fair enough. Um, and actually, weirdly enough, Goff, somebody actually found fossilized diarrhea, which was quite odd.
oh,
Well, you can learn a lot from shit, can't you?
yeah.
You said it. You said it. When people start looking these things up, right? And I'm trying to work out, how do you know it? How do you know that it's sick, and how do you know it's diarrhea, right?
Well, we have to
Um,
ask the paleontologist that found it.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Right, talking about nonsense, right, Richard?
No, nothing for me. Nothing
Okay,
exciting.
okay.
Mind you, you know that you're on about sick and
Yeah.
diarrhea.
Oh fuck.
Are you
Well,
Yeah,
it's
go
having?
on.
easier for them to sort out because they're all from different ends.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but I'm gonna make the comment, right? If you know anything about
Sick
some,
or
hang
diarrhea.
on, if you know something about digestive systems, right? Pigs like eating human waste because
Oh.
it's still got undigested meat
Mm,
Well, I like
in it.
mm,
eating humans, don't I? Pigs.
Yeah,
mm.
that's right. Look, I think I've had enough of this discussion. Right. Um. Right. Okay. So Anne, um, any news from you, darling?
Well, the only thing you put on, or was on I think it was on one of your sites. It was the, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was the University of Cardiff, the Museum of Cardiff, doing some workshops of cleaning artifacts.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it was recently, but it looked quite recent. I don't know if it was you actually. Have you ever led a team of anyone cleaning artifacts?
But yeah, but that was some time ago.
Oh, this is recently.
That's some time ago.
And you can join the workshop, I think. Yeah, sort of if you want to have a little bit of
I think that's the
experience.
National Museum in Wales.
Yeah,
Um.
National Museum.
Anyway, thanks for that, Anne. We've got Ruth joined us. Anything from you, Pat?
No, I saw a little bit of uh, Loch Ness Monster, investigations and mysteries of all that. And actually, the first photograph I saw, the one with the head up and all that, it was a fake, And as serpentines go sideways, they don't go up and down, they can't
Oh,
shape.
all right. Yeah, yeah.
So, and then even the latest thing was some sort of fin or something in the down way deep in there. And it was a fake also. So anyhow, I
Oh,
gave up watching this. I haven't conclusion of it, but
I mean, they have been going under the lakes, the locks. Oh, there's been a program on going down looking for jewelry and things that people.
oh yes, I saw that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if
it's,
they found anything. They must have found something, or they wouldn't have had a show.
yeah, that's
Those
right.
jewelry and
Right,
stuff.
Strange.
yeah. Cool.
Oh, no,
I, I,
nothing historic, nothing. No.
that's fine, Pat. And Ruth, anything from you, darling?
Not a lot. Just
Not
got
a lot.
here.
And Ruth managed to get online using her phone, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's good.
So
I did it
I've got
quickly, but
I've got a little bit of news. We've got our we've nearly completed our Mary Lloyd. So the Mary Lloyd has been the jaw mechanism of the Mary Lloyd is now working thanks to Alan Smith in Barry. The head is now on a pole. So now we've now got to put the eyes in, the ears, and the cloak, and we'll have a proper Barry Mary. So and also the Kate met the council this morning, and we've had a load of material given to us to maintain St. Barrack's Chapel over Barry Island and Glanimore. So if I don't, Goff hasn't been there yet, so maybe Pat. So if you ever need to go and see St. Barrack's Chapel, let us know, and we'll let you know when we're there next, and you can have a little look around. So I wanted to mention that, and we're going to crack on. So last night we were answering a question that is a question that either Anne on a Tuesday or Anne on a Wednesday mentioned. Right, one second, Ruth. I'm gonna cut your mic a minute, Ruth. Ruth, here you go. We're oh, hang on.
Rufus.
Hang on, I've just lost her. Oh, hang on. Asked to start video. Right, there we go. Right. So I lost that a minute. So yeah. So one of you a few months back, it was about 6 months ago, when we were coming up with topics for these classes, and one of you mentioned the question: was there hierarchy in the Iron Age? And I thought the best way to answer that question is by looking at examples of the Iron Age world in Britain, and that's the way we do it. And then also there was another question of what was medicine, what was the medical standard like in the Iron Age, right? So we look at that as well. We were going to do Iron Age coins part 4. Unfortunately, my reference book has disappeared for the moment, right? Because we're having a really good old sort out and tidy up here. So as Roger commented last night, are you in your mum's house? Because the background, looks quite snazzy, right? No, I'm not. In my own house. So let's go on to these images. But there was something that did come up last night, and I looked because somebody sent me something, or there was something that had been reported yesterday about a huge Iron Age hoard that had been found. Well, I couldn't find that, but then I found an Iron Age hoard that actually been found in Jersey, right? So that's where we started last night. So I'm just going to see where we are with everything, and hopefully everything will go quite nicely. So we've got our gallery there, and is the Jersey thing there? No, it's not. So what I did, I went to look at not Baldrick. Hang on, stop a minute. There we go. Off. I went to Google last night, and I typed in Jersey iron. There it is. I typed in this, and what we've got is which one did I use? There's a few actually. There's a few images. Hang on, let's just see if it's one of these.
Gruville.
Yeah, a massive hoard was found in Jersey, right? So, you're a huge hoard, right? And these are some of the images of this hoard. So I read this out last night, and a Jersey Iron Age coin hoard sets world record. Two men who found a huge hoard of pre-Christian coins in a field in Jersey have been recognized as record setters. The Celtic coins were discovered by metal detectorists Reg Mead and Richard Vines in 2012, but it wasn't reported until 2020, interestingly enough. The number of coins has been verified as... Oh, anyone guess how big this coin hoard was? Just chuck a figure in there. How many coins would make a huge coin hoard of silver and gold coins and bronze coins? Any ideas?
1,500.
Nope. Let's go a bit higher than that.
Oof.
Higher or lower? Go on, Anne. Give it a guess. One more guess.
2,000.
How many?
2,000.
What if I started off? What if I said 9,347? Is that a lot?
Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
Hang on. What if I added a 6 in front of that? 69,347 coins.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Oh goodness. And this is. There they are.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you can imagine the coroners now. In the coroner's inquest, there's a number of individuals involved, and you can imagine one says, right, I counted 69,347, and the other one goes, I counted 69,340, and on that note, they've got to start counting again, right? So there was other objects in there. You can just see a little bit of a torque sticking out there. There's a torque there as well, a golden torque.
It looks like a Coke tin ring.
Yeah.
Coke tins through the ages. Apparently, Mr. Vine and Mr. Mead had been involved the whole way through, and it was lovely receiving the official Guinness World Record certificates. When the hoard was first discovered, its value was estimated at about £10 million.
Ooh.
10 million, it's a lot of money, really. Some of the coins which were found in the east of the island are on display in the museum in Jersey. And it's basically said, we are not surprised at this achievement and are delighted that such an impressive archaeological item was discovered, excavated, examined and displayed in Jersey. Once again, it puts our island in the spotlight of international research of Iron Age coinage and demonstrates the world-class heritage that Jersey has to offer. And basically, if you can see gold there as well. There's other items that are actually found in here, right? And if I go onto the BBC page, I think look at these beautiful items, absolutely beautiful, and they really, really are. And there is the hoard. And actually, if you go to you can see some of the gold being, some of the coins and the gold there. The hoard thought to date from about 50 years before the birth of Christ. Now, there are 2 points with this, right? And it's a learning curve when you get this news, right? It's the last paragraph. We're not getting that yet. I'm really interested by the depth that these were actually found, right? The metal detector enthusiast discovered that these at a depth, wait for it, not of 1 foot, not of 2 foot, but they found this at a depth of 1 meter, right? Which I got to be honest with you, digging into the ground 1 meter deep is actually quite an achievement, right? Digging, I don't know. I don't know how you go about that, because you're in the middle of a field. To dig a meter deep, you've got to dig a big area to go a meter deep. You can't just dig a tiny little hole and keep going because it will cave in. That's one point. That's a really interesting point. Mr. Vine, right, said it had taken 30 years to locate the coins after receiving a tip-off in the 1980s from a woman who said she had spotted something that looked like silver coins, silver buttons in a field. The hoard is officially owned by the Crown, he added. Prior to the discovery, the largest hoard found in the British Isles was the Canito hoard, which was unearthed in Wiltshire in 1978. It contained 54,951 low-value copper coins manufactured in the 200 years BC. And I actually thought that was really odd because I looked up the Canito hoard in front of everybody, and it actually turned out that the Canito hoard was a hoard of Roman coins, which did not date from 200 years BC, which was more likely dating to the middle part of the 200 years AD. Right. Now, I wanted to make a point of that, and the reason why I wanted to make a point of that is always check the evidence. Because if you had a coin hoard in Britain dating to 200 years BC, it would have been at a time before they started making coins. So fact checking is really, really important. And on that note, the BBC didn't get that right. I just thought I'd check that in there for you guys. Right. So what it is now. Okay, what it is now. I know we've seen this building, right, and. I need to remove that off my device. And what we basically did last night is that I looked at this amazing piece, right, that examined the question of status, hierarchy in the Iron Age, but via a learned curve. Put it that way. So lots of the things that we're going to see now, we already know. But to answer that question about hierarchy, it's good to go down a little bit of a channel, right? This is obviously looking at hierarchy in the Iron Age in Scotland. However, what we do with the Iron Age in Scotland, if you remember, the Iron Age usually starts around Britain, roughly between 800 and 700 years before the birth of Christ. But in southern England, the Iron Age ends precisely in the summer of AD 43. But in Scotland, it continues way into the 400 years AD, because the Romans don't conquer most of Scotland, and that's a point. So their Iron Age continues. And then you've got the Pictish period, and then you've got the Viking period, and then Bob's your uncle. So when one of the discussions that we had last night was trying to get a scope of understanding what hierarchy is in the Iron Age, and it's a very different concept than maybe what you could have been taught at school. And at the top here, we think about population levels in Iron Age Britain around 1.5 million. So if you spread that around the whole of Britain and Ireland, that's a very small number of people spread around. Now, it's likely that the people responsible for building this broch on the island of Musa, which is the Musa broch, this is 12.5 meters high today, probably up to 15 meters high. I've been there. It was great. I stood on top of that. And the point is that, is this built for somebody who's got all the airs and graces, or is this built by the community, right? Does it represent the community? That's something that I would say, and other archaeologists would agree. But it's not answering the question. People in Britain made metals from various silver, copper, iron, tin, everything. And so this heralded a new era of metal working technology. So this thing about hierarchy and there's a modern term, the hierarchy of need, but it's just slightly different. But when you think about the people that maybe that were at the top of the chain, as it were actually metalsmiths, were potters, were actually people, woodworkers. In fact, lots of people may have been at the top of this hierarchical tree in the Iron Age. And one of them there was a odd moment last night, and I basically said, in the situation where we're educating tonight, right? I asked Margaret, who is the most important person here? And Margaret said, it's you, Carl. And my response was, yeah, but that is quite transient, because if you're saying that I'm the most important person in this group on a Tuesday evening for the two and a bit hours that we do it, right? If I wasn't teaching and somebody else was, then that person would have the same status as me. What I'm trying to say is that in the Iron Age, status is deemed very different than conceptual thoughts today. For example, when we look at the sense of hierarchy today, we think about the police, we think about the king, we think about slippery Starmer, we think about the politicians that are in charge of the country, we think about the councils, we think about all these other things, right? And that's our hierarchy today, right? And aristocracy, bankers, that's our hierarchy today. But that is not the same when we look at the Iron Age. When we think about the Iron Age, the Iron Age was a gradual process. And one of the things that we met last night is quite clear, that when you talk about hierarchy in the Iron Age, it's more fluid, it's more less people up themselves, right? It only starts to get on the edge of modern representations of hierarchy when you start to get people who are producing coins, like those leaders of Caliver Atrabatum, such as Commius, such as Commius, Tin Commius and Commius. We're thinking about Verica and all these other figures associated with the Atrebatoi people, right? It's only then at the end years of coming into the last years of Iron Age Britain up to the Roman period that we now start to have a proper level of hierarchy that we would understand today. But up until that point, up until about 60, 70 years BC, what we are talking about is what we've said. Hierarchy is more fluid. And it's not those big status people who are full of themselves who want to have their heads on coins. When we see this chunk of the Iron Age, there's so much impressionable evidence that we don't see previous, and it's by far not a period where people are fighting and killing. And I say this a lot because if you're out killing people all the time, you're not able to produce buildings like that. You're not able to do this. You're not able to make wheels. You're not able to make walkways. You're not able to have a coracle on your back. You're not able to make boats. You're not able to have these type of cauldrons if you're warring all the time, right? And as you know from present day wars, you've got no home. You're in a camp, and you're having to be fed by charities, and that's not civilization. It's not peace. But when you've got peace, you're able to architecturally aspire to build something as amazing as the Brocha Musa and those great hitherto things that we've spoken a lot about. We think about hill forts, bank and ditched enclosures, like Maiden Castle, impressive undertakings that were a celebration of the lives of people within a community. And what we did last night was that I went on and I went back to this and I typed in where else would I try to demonstrate the majesty of the Iron Age world. We need to go to Maiden Castle. And we think about this, and we always, sometimes when we talk about hierarchy, it's a different question than what is this about? What is this about? park that idea. But when we talk about hierarchy, everybody's involved in investing in this, right? Maiden Castle, for example, near Dorchester, it's a couple of miles away from the modern city of Dorchester, which is actually based on the Roman city, right? This was built over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. A site that's over 50 acres in area. A site that it takes 10 minutes to walk around the top circuit of Palisade. A site that I've been to. A site that Pat's been to. And I don't know about the rest of you. But this is not the emboldened projection of one individual and one family. This is the projections and needs of a community. Eventually, somebody might be elected to look after the needs of everybody, but that's towards the end of the Iron Age. One thing that is clear is that this is a construct of the community, like the Great Pyramids at Giza. The Great Pyramids at Giza were built under the service of people who served a year to create something majestic in the eyes of the Great Pyramid for the Great Pharaoh. But the Great Pharaoh would not have been able to build it without the support of you. And it's you, all of us, that offer these people the set standard of where they become in life. We think of an undertaking like this, answering the question about hierarchy. And we think, going back very much to my text, and we go back to this again. And we think these huge, tall, dry stone towers, these brocks, guns themselves are like this, but they're fat and squat with thick walls that you actually find on the west coast of Scotland, and you find them in Ireland. The likes of the lowly crannog, structures built in and around lochs and wetlands, talking about the Loch Ness Monster earlier on, whether on natural or artificial islands or raised up on stilts. This again is the emboldened embodiment of Iron Age civilization, wherever you are in Britain, except you need to have a loch to build one of these crannogs, like we do see at Llangors Crannog in Brecon, but that is not Iron Age. It's actually from around the 800 years, AD 800s. Most buildings in prehistory were circular in plan. The round house was the standard building of the day. And there she is. Nice little roundhouse there. These structures could be used as domestic homes, industrial workshops, or farm buildings. Most had a single doorway and a central hearth, which formed the focus of the home. It was where people cooked, gathered, stayed warm. The internal space may have been divided with woven wattle panels or screens to create activity zones. But nevertheless, these are buildings that represented an individual family within a community. I just think maybe this is a concept, is to think about this and how we understand the sense of hierarchy in the Iron Age. Maybe the person or the people that were seen to be special at the top of the hierarchy in an Iron Age village, instead of issuing coins, instead of having a huge palisaded edifice that represented their family, maybe later in the Iron Age. But before all of that, part of the community aspect of the Iron Age and the sense of hierarchy, maybe the metalsmith had a slightly bigger house than everybody else. And they may have had a slightly bigger house than everybody else because they may have needed it for metalworking. They may have needed it for the final elements of the great craft that they're producing. But nevertheless, there's something in that. To be somebody who's special in a village is somebody who's supported. What do we mean by that? If you're producing iron, you need to be supported. If you're going to be at a furnace, looking out for the color of the flame for 24 hours, You can't go away. You've got to be fed. You've got to have people come in with liquid to you, right? You've got to have people looking after you, right? That's what we mean by hierarchy. If it wasn't for that person creating metal objects, you wouldn't have them. So what you've got to do, you've got to support this person. And then you get this small elements of the hierarchical system that we eventually see, but which in a way is completely different from what we see with hierarchy today. Social structures, those who built and lived in these buildings, in the Iron Age hill forts, whether they exerted any control, it was a level of control of respect. And then one of the things I after them, after Margaret saying, you're the person who's in charge now, you're at the top of the hierarchy, me for those 2.5 hours, right? Then I turned around and said to somebody else in the group who used to teach, I said, well, why don't you teach these classes? She said, oh, I don't want to teach these classes. I come on to listen to you. And there's I pay you to teach the classes. And that's a really interesting point. She has a choice on who to follow. She has a choice on she has a choice to do these classes, right? And if nobody joined these classes, then I wouldn't be here, right? But I think, I know the point we're making here, that it's an invented hierarchy. It's we choose to have people that organize us, right? It's a bit like a relationship. Pat goes out walking the dogs while her husband stays at home making dinner, right? I think that's the way it goes, isn't it, Pat? But the point is, in that there's an elected understanding of who does what, and there's somebody who's a little bit more important because you've allowed them to be a little bit more important. Those eventually, when you think about when you think about going back to that huge hill fort, right? If we go back to the huge hill fort, and I know you want to say something, Anne, so whilst I get the image, say it, Anne.
No, it's
Oh,
no, I just say there's a hierarchical society, and then there's socialism.
but this, I'm not actually talking about socialism.
I know, I don't mean socialism really. I don't think
actually you're talking about a little bit about Marxism and how communist Russia was initially organized, where you got the likes of Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin, people who you elect to lead you, and if you didn't elect to lead them, you'd get rid of them. So this is that's more of a brutal way of saying it, Anne, but in a way that's what we're seeing.
Sorry to interrupt, because
No, I glad you chucked that in there, because it's more of an understandable way. It's less, it's not political.
No.
Say for example, if the person making metal is a bit too old, right, then you look towards somebody else to make the metal, right? So that person is no longer at the top of the hierarchy of the community. They might be respected and revered. They may become one of the elders. So that's another category that we go into.
It is about choosing your, like you said before, needs. It's like if a person has a skill, then they're at the top of the whatever the skill is that people need. Exactly. They're at the top of the hierarchy. And then you get, as you say, the supporters, and then So I don't know. Something just went through my head that it doesn't always.
No, I think what you've said is really valid. But we're not talking about people like Pol Pot here. We're not talking about Hitler or Stalin. What we're talking about. And we're not talking about Keir Starmer, and we're not talking about the systems that we've got today. We're talking about something that's very mutual. In a way, something that I didn't say last night is that when you look at Native American societies, not the sort of Navajo or Apache type things. You're talking about when Native American societies were less reactive towards the West. And maybe you could look at representations for natives like the Inuits and so on, and you start to think about they've got to be organized. They've got to have people who know what they're doing. They've got to have people who are able to lead, because if you don't, you're not going to get anywhere. However, when we get towards the end of the Iron Age, right, you do find those people creating coins. You do find people saber rattling. You do find the likes of Prasutagus. You do find the likes of Boudica. That's the best one we can look at, Boudica. And we think, well, they all look towards Boudica, even though she was the queen, right? She wasn't a natural leader, right? But they made Boudica the leader, right? Because they elected her to lead them, and it's but in a way, right, that harks back to an earlier time. But there is something akin to keeping the old ways when you get to the end of the Iron Age, just before the Roman world, and it's basically say for 500 years your family has been responsible for building this, generation after generation, every generation it keeps going. And then suddenly somebody turns around and says, actually, we need to organize things differently. We've got our fort here, our Iron Age fort here. They've got an Iron Age fort down the road. They've got an Iron Age fort down the road. Now we've got to be a little bit more savvy, right? So make me the leader. And when you make me the leader, right, forget about the metalsmiths. Now this is now we're getting into something more familiar. Make me the leader, but it is a self-respecting leader that basically, in return for this, for example, you would bring grain and stuff to be stored here, right? It's an allegiance in times of trouble, where your farmstead would be basically left. This is at the end of the Iron Age, and maybe this is where people start to get a little bit more tribal, and definitely tribal. So this is where we get the likes of the Atrebates and the Trinovantes and the Iceni and the Durotriges and the Demeti and so on. Not the Demeti, forget that, that's in Wales. The Denomi tribe and so on. And you're thinking about these actual tribal people getting together. Now, what's happening to developed tribes in Britain? Again, this is talking about hierarchy, and hopefully this is coming across clear. So when you get to when you start to get into the AD 100, AD 100, just after 100 years BC, running all the way up nicely to about 50 years BC, right? People are starting to think, well, your little group of people over there, the Anne people, right? We're the Karl people, and then the Goth people, right? Why don't we all get together, right, and create a tribe, right? A grouping of people. Right, and that's where you get the people like the Kantai coming together. They all started off as little groups, and then they all came together as these confederated peoples to create this tribal world, which obviously then needs a leader. So this is when things are really starting to change. And back to this really interesting point that's written down front. The very important point is, very important point is that, was there much warfare in the Iron Age? We don't have much evidence for it. And at the opening, when we started tonight, I basically said, if there's constant warfare, right, then we wouldn't be here today. And one of the comments I made last night is that to develop as a people, we did not need the Roman Empire. I keep saying that. I've said that week after week. What was Mary Beard would say, the legacy of Rome was actually Christianity. Well, we wouldn't have had Christianity in Britain if it wasn't for the Romans. That's absolute nonsense, because when you go to Ireland, Ireland wasn't invaded by the Romans. And which is the most Christian part of the UK even today? Ireland. Right? Where did the Irish get their Christianity from? They didn't get it from the Romans. So no matter what way you look at this, we would have developed as a people eventually, right? but it was not because we were out killing and conquering. Because there's only a certain amount of people you can kill and conquer in Britain before you actually run out, right? So the everyday lives of normal people would have been on little farms with little buildings like this, and this is all part of the system and part of the society that is being developed from quite laissez-faire, quite open, then into an organized society leading up to the period of ancient Rome. But there's something else that really finishes answering this question on hierarchy, right? And it's called getting around and looking a little bit at art and crafts. Because the humble wheel, the humble track, the humble coracle. And for us to really understand, the Iron Age to say 200 years BC, to actually create trackways and to be able to just paddle around everywhere, right? It must have been a less territorial land in Britain. And that's a really, really good point, because if you've got trackways that go on for mile upon mile upon mile, right? If you've got something like territory, they're not going to go anywhere. Because basically, look, Dave, right? I don't want your trackway into my bit, because it's like, this is my territory, right? So the trackway would just stop. We don't see that. They keep going, right? So that must mean before the period of coins, before people started leading society in Iron Age Britain after about 50 years BC. Before all that, the land must have been very open for people to go around. This sense of transportation, this sense of journeying by foot, water, or even by wheel, right, is something that is quite powerful in understanding a very much more open society than the hugely fixed hierarchical society of today. This wonderful wooden cart wheel, right? This was found in Scotland. There you go, at Blair Drummond Moss. This might actually be a little bit into the Bronze Age, but again, it's a wheel. It's would have had a chunky axle through the middle there, and this would have been a cart which would have been pulled by oxen, horses, and ponies. And you're starting to think, well, this technology, this sort of developing world movement without inhibition, right? As opposed to what we've got today, whereas we are a very controlled society, one of the most controlled societies on the planet, some say. But that control allows us to use motorways and to travel on a motorway and roads from one part of Britain to the top part of Britain without being stopped by anybody, unless you're me and I get stopped by the police at least 3 or 4 times a year. But the point is, right, there are different pros and cons of a hierarchical society and a not so hierarchical society that we're talking about, very much Iron Age Britain before about 50 years BC. And looking again, this is known as the Coralie track, which dates precisely from 148 BC on the 24th of September at 12:15. Yes, we've got a precise date of 148 years BC for this. And this itself, it says that this is similar to the Sweet Track in Ireland. Not Sweet Track in Ireland. This is similar to the track, which 6 years ago, this being built at Coralie in Scotland, 140 BC. Very similar to the Sweet Track. The Coralie track is quite broad. And it's very, very broad indeed. And it does make you wonder, maybe they could have had carts on these. More likely, where this wheel was found at Blair Drummond in Scotland, the trackway itself is 3.5 meters wide. So there's 2 points with that. If you're building quite a long trackway, right, which goes across the moss mile after mile, right? And you're thinking, right, okay, there's 2 points for this. If it's very, very wide, right, it means that they may have used carts. This wheel may have followed along this walkway made of tree trunks and brushwood at Blair Drummond Moss. To create something that long, you're obviously not fighting all the time, because nobody's threatening you, nobody's putting you under any threat, for example, right? So you've got all of these things that the archaeology is telling you: less hierarchical, more open, and having the ability to create these things. I haven't got an image in my set here tonight, but what I'd like to do is go back off to onto Google again, and I would like to type in an Iron Age chariot. Now, one of the problems with the Iron Age in Britain is the misconception and confusion that is all abound when we compare Britain with, say, France. We know that France, very advanced Iron Age society, right? We're talking about writers like Dio Cassius writing about France. We're talking about Julius Caesar writing about France and Gaul and so on. And they mention various different things, right? But one thing that Julius Caesar mentions is that we're still using chariots when people in Europe are not, right? And there's talk of lots of chariots at the time of Julius Caesar's invasion. His second attempt to invade in 55 years BC. And loads of people have got chariots, and Julius Caesar's going, this is a bit antiquated, isn't it? But there's lots of them. And there's not thousands of them, but there's lots of them. And there's a point to be made here. If we chuck in this, right, that's basically based on the Newbridge chariot burial, for example. Now, the interesting thing is that the Newbridge chariot burial is one example of a prehistoric vehicle, and you've obviously got the image there. It gives a glimpse of what an Iron Age chariot in Britain might have looked like, though it is an exceptional find and not representative of everyday life and transport in the Iron Age. How much of that is true or not? Because when we look at the Iron Age Britain, we're talking about we talk up until a few years ago, we had discovered 50 odd chariot burials in Britain, right? And alongside that, maybe we've come across 10,000 burials of other people, right? But it's still a lot of chariots, right? And maybe chariots didn't represent, lords and kings and aristocrats. Maybe they represented these special people that could have some kind of experience with using a chariot. However, against that, if you're a metalsmith, right, and you're very special in society, when have you got time to use a chariot? But then that's another point. If you've got a chariot, right, it means that there's spare time, that you've got an ability of not having to work on the land every day. It's an echo of free time. But where were these chariots used? Because obviously, if you're going to be using it on one of these trackways, you're not going to go very fast, right? And you can't really carry much on them. But we do find 50 of these represented in the archaeological record, and we've done a class on these as well. So that aside, and as we go to a coracle. Now, coracles themselves, you could think, are a form of transportation that can be used on rivers, lochs, avoiding Nessie, and the ocean, all provided opportunities for travel by boat. And by the way, Pat, did you know the first mention of a monster in Loch Ness goes to around AD 600? So so these little coracles, they could be carried. Lightweight coracles, or even substantial logboats like this is a Bronze Age example. But something like this could be carried on your back, and it gives you an opportunity to use the waterways to get around. And this is one of those things that the desirable projection of having these, and we've got archaeological evidence of these as well, not just being used today. And the point is with these is that again, it gives you an idea of an open access society in the wonderful Iron Age. So I'm just gonna go back on something a minute. So one last thing we're going to do now is we've basically answered the question now, but I just thought I would just chuck this in you, right? So in other words, we know what hierarchy was in the Iron Age now. That's just great. There's 2 stages. At the end, people really want to be full of themselves and control little communities, big communities, tribes. But before about 50 years BC, things as we've explained. And again, talking about a peaceful world and how having an Iron Age world that projects opulence, and the Iron Age world in Britain that projects a lack of warfare. Many Iron Age communities were self-sufficient, producing their own food and making much of what they needed, from pottery to wooden vessels, bone antler tools and textiles. Archaeologists find evidence for these activities at many Iron Age sites, suggesting that they were everyday skills that most communities maintained through the generations. And again, these are people that were used to being in communities, everyone working together and getting on. You're not going to get things done if you don't get on. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a film, I think it's about 1981, 1982, called The Gods Must Be Crazy. It's a weird film. But the raison d'etre of this film, it's like an arty-farty film, and it got Gods Must Be Crazy too as well. And the film is about a community in the Serengeti, right? And a glass bottle falls out the sky and bangs this guy on the head, right? And up until then, these people in Serengeti had never seen anything harder than bone, right? They didn't have any stones or anything because it's big desert with wood and sand and stuff. Anyway, this bottle, and he takes this bottle into the group, and up until that point, nobody possesses anything. Nobody's got a sense of possession or anything. But after a while, they all want to possess this bottle, right? And he's got to get rid of this evil bottle. Anyway, the point to be made about that is that until there's a disturbance in society changing, things can just keep going on the way they always had in the Iron Age for many hundreds of years until things changed. Archaeologists find evidence for lots of these activities, metal working, even still working flints, textile working in the Iron Age, suggesting that they were everyday skills that most communities maintained through the generations. We see this, for example, at Must Farm. I know Must Farm is a Bronze Age site. We mentioned that the other week. 3,000 years ago, a little bit before the Iron Age. But we see that lots of those buildings at Must Farm, people had access to making metals. They had access to grinding grain. They had loom weights. All these things happened within those buildings. Metalworking required a more complex skill set, as you can tell. And while basic blacksmithing might be carried out locally, prestige items would more likely have been produced by specialists. The aesthetics on display in some Iron Age metalwork takes these items firmly into the zone of art rather than necessities. Decorated bowls and cauldrons. The point is, this is the point, right? The point of that is that moving away from cauldrons, this is a zoomorphic pin, basically animal. It looks like shape of an animal. smack then bang in there, that circular bit may have been a precious stone, and that as a pin, right? Precious stone enamel, basically. That as a pin for a cloak is a little bit garish, right? And having the excess metal, creating this in the first place, means that your society's at peace, right? And again, you might have people in the society in your group who says, well, you know, can I have one of those made? You know, somebody else has got one down the road. Can you make one for me? Right. I'm not sure that this is an aristocratic object. I don't think that at all. Or is it part of somebody from the top orders of the hierarchy? Right. But again, animalistic designs, elaborate jewelry made from precious metals were being produced in the Iron Age. The Blair Drummond talks, and for example, this object all gives an idea of the indication of things changing, and people having the time to develop into a new age, which was the end of the Iron Age. And again, go into this as well, looking and understanding this as being able to broadcast this massive, interesting Iron Age world. And again, the point is that does answer hierarchy. There wasn't the hierarchy in the modern sense up until about 50 years BC. Then hierarchy changed, and it was more fluid and more linked and more understandable than we would see hierarchy today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. I need one of my funny tablets, and I just thought I'd chuck this up on the screen, right? And I don't know if anyone knows what this is, but if they can guess what this is about, then they get a great big hug when I see them next. Right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. And right, okay, I don't know what happened to Ruth, but let's have a 10-minute break, and I'll have my donut at the same time, but I'll have a 10-minute break. But before we have the break, Richard, anything you'd like to say?
Oh, no. Be interesting. Nothing to.
Are you going to? Oh, what's that, Rich?
I also have nothing to add. It's
Well,
interesting.
me
subject.
and Kate wanted to know if you're going to be helping us out with Glanamore and St. Barrack's Chapel.
Well, I can't see I'll be able to do a lot.
Oh, shut up, Richard. Don't inhibit yourself. We'll get you doing something. Right. Goth, anything from you?
Oh, I'm looking forward to the next bit.
As my granddad used to say, there's nothing wrong with a bit of the other. Right. Pat.
I just like that name, zoomorphic pin.
Zoomorphic, yes.
That's a great name. It tells you what it is, animal-like, and it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a nice terminology, zoomorphic. Exactly. And anything from you, Anne?
No, just listening.
That's all good. Right, it's 8:09 now. Right, we've nearly done a precise hour. Right, so we're gonna oh yeah, starting at 7:11's good. We didn't usually start until about 20 to 8. Right, so that means that we should be finishing around 9 tonight, so Pat can get to bed.
Yay.
Right, let's take a break, and Richard, tell them about the strange things. Anyway, I'll be back.
Okay.
Well, I've got a problem, Richard, about going collecting, helping do the litter, because I can't stand steady, and
Nor
I can't
I.
see. So you could hold a bowl, and I could sort of get things
Oh, dear.
around you. I don't know. I'll go get a cup of coffee then.
Me too.
Bye.
I think we'll call them in now. Come on, boys! Come on in! What? Here, boys, come on! Come on, Pat! Anne! There she is. Good.
Mm.
Come on, Anne, get into those undies.
I had to make
Oh,
coffee and tea.
Anne, have you got a pink nightie?
Hmm?
Have you got a pink nightie?
No, I don't wear nighties.
Right, little
I
nightie.
did have
What?
one once.
What, a little nightie? What, with ribbons and stuff on it?
Hippity,
Right. What?
hippity. We used to have
Confetti.
these hippity parties, you know, and you could get a nightie.
Right. Okay. For God's sake, please. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. Let's just get started. Right. Okay. This is a I've got to get the start of this. Right. Okay. I didn't regret doing this last night to try and answer the medical question. But maybe I should have just cut to the chase a bit sooner, and that's what I'm probably going to do. So the point of these slides is the Stanway enclosure was a doctor's burial, right? And there we go in Stanway. And this is near Camel and Juneham, Colchester. Dosbeck's Park, which we had a trip to. And this whole thing, these images are to discuss a doctor that was around in the sort of late Iron Age Roman period, sort of, and this person who's buried as a doctor roughly around AD 45. So it's just that bit that Colchester's starting to fall into the Roman world. So the point being made here is this is a doctor of rational ways, i.e., I'm going to cut your leg off, or this is also a doctor of ritual ways that, in fact, he's got a number of short lengths and long lengths of rods. So he's also like a magician at the same time, as well as having a surgical set. We're mindful that this individual is very different, and he's buried. He's buried within this arrangement of enclosures. So let's go to the doctor's burial. And one thing I wanted to quickly chuck in you that when I went to Avebury once, we went to the place where, when back in the past, they found an individual that had been one of the stones had fallen down on this individual, right? And except Avebury dates from the Neolithic period, and this person was buried in the early 1300s, right? And we know it was a doctor because the doctor must have been undermining the stone as part of, I don't know, whatever, and the stone fell on him, and we found his surgical kit. So we do find across a few doctors in history, but that's a medieval one. This is an Iron Age one. So these brief slides, research into past magical activities associated with the Doctor have often considered them as either detached activities or alternately as part of a wider ritual action. But with this burial, this individual has got a dual thinking, both as a ritualistic and a rational Doctor, right? So the rationale of actually treating somebody with a physicality or drugs, ritual, casting a spell, or whatever you want to call it, with the rods. The application, and somebody online, they're saying, is this some kind of a wizard? This is both a doctor and a wizard, right? So the application of magic in the past should be considered as one amongst a series of parallel and overlapping social activities. You could actually say that Jesus Christ was actually a wizard, because he had a form of ritual cleansing for people. But Jesus Christ wasn't a doctor. So anyway, let's move on away from that. But the dichotomy here is that we're finding somebody who's considered of magic and medicine, which might be seen as binary opposites in a modern sense, but back then they were interconnected. So what we see as part of the social society that this individual was lived in, and possibly lots of doctors of the time, is evidenced in the operations of the archaeological excavation as borne out in this image. So a nuanced consideration of the entwining of magic with other social practices, physical practices. And again, this person's buried with everything that they might need also in the afterlife. So they had in a way not only had you've got physical surgical instruments, you've got like these rods, part of a magical, mystical way of dealing with the world. But this person's prepared for the afterlife. They've got they've got various cups, they've got platters, lots of them would have had food in. There's a game board there, with game pieces. We've got jet beads, we've got amphora. The person's buried with an amphora. Well, what's all that about? So, a saucepan, strainer board for straining wine, for example. That's what the strainer a bowl is for. So this person is full of interesting areas of the late Iron Age now coming into the Roman world. And in many ways, there's not much difference between a Roman doctor and an Iron Age doctor, for example. So when we think about this again, we think about the activities of a dual rationale within this site. And this whole world, this whole burial is, I believe, extremely fascinating. And as we look to understand what all this is about in a few moments, we can sort of understand that this sort of fits within a landscape of change, but this is still within the Iron Age. And when you think about it, this doctor is extremely rich, right? He's buried with lots of really interesting, powerful objects, and the surgical kit is intriguing, which we'll look at. And again, these, if we want, before we look at the surgical kit, we think, right, okay, some of these rods, right, the groupings of rods in the doctor's burial. And when we think about rods, we think about the likes of the Pavlan cave burial back to 30,000 years ago. I believe that's not exactly a genuine, but back with what they found rods. They found ivory rods associated with that individual at Pavlan cave. So that is a sense of ritual, and a sense of something linked to this, but thousands of years apart. And then you've got this image, right? And you think about this image, and so typical things that you would take for granted today, right? Scalpel, um, an iron scalpel, two iron scalpels buried with the doctor. And the very interesting thing is these are buried with a doctor, right? They don't go into the modern world. They're offered for the doctor into the doctor's afterlife, and these were items of his trade. You've got a saw broken into 4 pieces, handle comprised of iron with flanking plates of wood, bone sandwiched between bronze outer plates, right? So this is an iron, and there's bronze there. But with this said, with this object, the saw, you can think about sawing off a leg, you know. So at some point, this person's using that to saw off a leg, you know, cutting through the humerus of the arm bone or the femur of the leg bone to try and treat some ailments of the past. And again, a saw, we were really interested in the saw thing because a saw had been found in Turkey. So saws have been around for quite some time, but definitely in this doctor's kit. You've got hooks. Hooks can be used for various things in surgery. So again, a retractor, a single piece instrument. You've got an instrument, a retracting instrument, a bronze retracting instrument. But this is rather interesting. Fixation forceps, a spring forceps with looped head. So obviously forceps. Obviously we know forceps were still being used in modern childbirth up until recent years in Britain. I'm sad to say that I had a cousin that a brain was damaged because of forceps, and I never ever got to know her, called Dawn. But that was in the 1970s, and this person had forceps back in the Roman period, right? So you've obviously got tweezers as well. Well, yeah, you've got tweezers associated with this kit. You've got needles for stitching, and obviously stitching wounds together. And it's saying you one needle, single piece instrument with stout handle, textile found adhering to the handle. Okay, needle, textile found adhering to handle. So that may have been in some kind of a bag, right? So these are iron. A scoop probe, not really sure how big that is, but you've got a probe there. And it's talking about a handle there, whatever that was for. And you've got a knife, a short, solid handle, an acutely angled blade. One thing that is missing from this kit, which would actually make it complete, is actually flint. As you know, flint is still, well, some of you might not know, but flint is actually used in modern surgery today for delicate operations, right? And I don't know, maybe there may have been flint there, maybe they, but I think that's absolutely amazing and fascinating, right? But what I'd like to do next is basically there was something else I mentioned last night, and it was definitely to do with all of this, right? And I'm just going to double check and make sure I haven't got my notes here. If I do, then it'd be great. Yeah, one thing I can remember saying last night, I don't know where my notes are on this, but one thing I remember saying last night is that they researched both Roman and Iron Age burials, and they examined people that had been placed under surgery in both the Iron Age and the Roman period, and they actually found out that the the skills of an Iron Age surgeon in Britain were exactly the same skills demonstrated as Roman surgeons and Roman doctors when the Iron Age in Britain comes to an end in AD 43. So the point I'm trying to say is that when they're examining these bodies, they examined about 270 odd in Dorset, and half of them, I think half of them with Iron Age, half of them were Roman, and they basically looked at these bodies, and these were ones that had some kind of meeting with the doctor. And the Iron Age ones and the Roman ones showed the same medical skills in both periods, right? So this bears it out with this evidence that we've actually looked at now. So the last bit tonight is just trying to, well, actually, last but one. So I'm gonna read out a little bit of a list, right? So I can get my page in my book ready. Right, I did have it available. Oh yeah, I've got it straight away. There it is. So, Iron Age medical practices included bloodletting, scarification, which is obviously similar, cupping and blood transfusions. Bloodletting, a common medical practice that involved cutting a vein or artery to remove blood from the body because blood was seen to be infected and impure. 2, doctors believe that bloodletting restored balance to the body's 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Next, bloodletting. How much of this was being used in the Iron Age, we don't exactly know, right? But I'm sure we've got some instruments along the way. Bloodletting was used to treat a variety of conditions, including fevers and the plague. So scarification, whether we've got evidence for that, we've definitely got in the Georgian period anyway. A local type of bloodletting that involved scraping the skin with a tool that looked like a small box with blades. Yeah, you can imagine what that's about. Cupping, a local type of bloodletting that involved placing a dome over the skin to create suction and draw blood into the cup, and that was believed. It's a bit like you may as well just use leeches for that. Whether they had blood transfusions in the Iron Age, we don't know, right? Sort of using animal blood and so on, but all of these things could be imagined and thought about, and we don't know how far we go with this. But medical practice was quite high in the Iron Age. So what I wanted to do, sort of close with today, and we're not too far away from 9 anyway, was to try and sort of bring in a little bit of cemeteries and bring back to the previous topic that we were talking about with hierarchy, particularly in the late Iron Age. So this brings sort of everything together. So this pottery itself is known as Aylesford style pottery, right? And Aylesford style pottery actually comes from Kent. And towards the end of the last years before the birth of Christ, they started to see lots of burials with this type of pottery in Kent, and then obviously similar burials in the likes of Colchester, in the types of Welwyn Garden, for example. And these burials are an intriguing world of change leading up to AD 43. So, and one of those things is that Aylesford pottery is to be seen associated with cremational burial, which is very, very interesting, because this specific type of pot is being used for cremations for basically the whole society. This plan here is a plan of burials at a place known as Verulamium, which is the modern day name St Albans, north of London, in Hertfordshire, 20 miles north of London. And most of these are actually people buried in similar types of pottery like this, Aylesford pottery. And what they found with lots of these cremations, they found that with at least 222 of these cremations, all in black, they actually found that there was a brooch buried with them. But as you can see, that there are areas that are actually cordoned off, like there, like there, like there, like there, and so on. This is rather interesting because they've got areas in this cremated landscape, and there's also inhumation burials where people ain't cremated, right? That there's almost family plots and non-family plots, and this is now starting to move into the period where people are producing coins, and that there's more tribal groupings, and people are part of a larger organized groups like the Atrebates and the Caliver Atrebatum. So these Aylesford cremations were also cremation jars. These were actually made on the wheel. Now, that's something that we haven't mentioned. Towards the later part of the Iron Age, they started making pottery on the wheel. The wheel had been introduced from somewhere. It was definitely a new wave of style moving over to Britain. Amongst the Aylesford cremations were about a dozen very rich graves. And these very rich graves that you can actually see in various locations, such as St. Albans and Colchester, are presented for in front of us now. This is at a site known as King Harry's Lane in St. Albans. And this, as you can clearly see with this, you can see an array of jars, an array of items for the afterlife. And there's another point to be made here. As we get into the later years of the Iron Age, people have got opulence, there's excess, and there's trade, more trade with the Mediterranean. So things are really changing. Things are really becoming more revolutionized. And whereas before the hierarchy, before about 50 years BC, it was a bit laissez-faire, now things are starting to change. Where you get the likes of doctors' burials with all their artifacts, where you get the likes of this at Verulamium. And people are starting to move towards aspiring to be like Rome. Voila! This is actually from Welwyn Garden, and Welwyn Garden itself is an amazing landscape because in Hertfordshire, up until the 1960s, Welwyn Garden was just a new city, right? And they were finding lots of burials like this. So what they did, at one site at Welwyn Garden, they excavated this, and they found out that this burial isn't a Roman burial; is actually a native burial, and this is possibly roughly around 30 years BC, right? And when they excavated this, this is a hole in the ground which is 3 by 2 meters. When they excavated this, they come across 36 pottery vessels, 5 Italian wine amphoras at the back, a silver Roman drinking cup, a bronze wine strainer. Yes, they like their wine strainers, and 24 coloured glass gaming pieces. And this is all part of things changing. This is all part of this new interesting world. And yeah, some of the burials started to get intriguing because across these burials that we're finding in Kent and north of London and over towards Colchester, they in one of the burials they actually found a shirt that had been embroidered with gold threads. and basically they would find silver ears of wheat, basically silver that was meant to look like wheat. They would start to find chainmail in burials, lots of amphora in burials, even silver medallions of the Emperor Augustus. So what you've got is again, things are changing, things are altering into at the end of the Iron Age, and that point I made earlier on, if Rome had never invaded Britain, we would still be here today having this discussion, right? Except we wouldn't have all those wonderful Roman remains. But what we would have, Anne, is native British people would have started to build, wonderful things. If they could build brocks in Scotland without any influence from the Romans, I'm certainly sure they can build similar things down here. And one of the things that we're really starting to find in the Iron Age now at the end as well is that there's a preoccupation with the afterlife, as we saw with the burial of the Doctor, as we see with this individual. And the grave goods found with the late Iron Age burials indicate a strong preoccupation with the afterlife. Great care was taken to appropriate items to be buried with the cremated body into the afterlife. And you could say that this is become a little bit sort of romanticized, but things have changed. Things are very, very different. And Tackett, various people write about Britain as we're starting to go into the Roman period. But one Roman writer writes of Britain that you've got these far off forests, and Tacitus writes that in these far off forests you've got groves devoted to inhuman superstitions. And then we got Tacitus mentioning that word druids for the first time. And we get another Roman writer, Lucan, not related to Lord Lucan, in AD 60 also. He said the Iron Age people found the deities in natural places like forests and groves, marshes, lakes, rivers and springs. And one thing we don't talk about much in these classes, and maybe we will before we finish the Iron Age, is to say that we are a very superstitious people. And when we think, again, we've looked at bog bodies, and we think about change. This is a world of great, great change. And hopefully we'll be able to understand and learn a bit more over the next few months involving our beautiful, wonderful Iron Age. And we can have a nice session of questions, and then we can call it a night. So there we go. If I can get there. Right. Okay, then. Let's see if there's any questions. Anne?
I was just thinking of Killian, actually, and we have cremations at Killian,
Yes.
and I think burials.
Yeah, we got burials as well. Yes, we do.
But I don't think it's as wealthy. I mean, that grave was obviously wealth. They were wealthy in the southeast, and of course the Romans were soldiers. It was just soldiers, wasn't it? It was soldiers at Killian. So
Yes.
but one thing was that there is a lack of Iron Age artifacts around
At Killian. Yeah,
Killian.
exactly.
Maybe
Yeah,
because there's not been a lot of archaeology, beyond Killian. But yeah, no, I mean it's interesting to see that
Yeah, you do.
transition.
Yeah, you do actually have a hill fort above Killian, but obviously not in the center of Killian. So yeah,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
it's a very odd world that we see, with the Iron Age, and it's quite exciting to think that they did so well on Orkney and Shetland, and some of the most majestic buildings that we've got in Britain. And there's not a single tick of influence of the Roman world.
No.
And it does make you ask the big questions of language, and it makes you ask the big questions of, you know, how independent actually are we? We are very independent. And when you start to see things like doctors in the Iron Age in Britain being as clearly advanced as Roman doctors, you start to see the magic nature of our Iron Age unfolding in front of our very eyes.
We're certainly still more wealthy on the southeast, seems at the moment.
Yes. Always that.
Yeah.
Always. So what we got to do? We got to shout to Pat. Pat, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Good.
Where's this last place you were looking at with the 5 amphoras? Where was that located?
But basically, I've got to make sure I get the location right. That's actually at Welwyn Garden, Hertfordshire.
Oh, right, Hertfordshire. Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Basically, there's a Roman site at Welwyn Garden that you can actually see as well.
Oh.
One of my journeys around Britain is to actually this is quite odd. This is a really interesting point. My journey around Britain, I'm looking at various Roman remains in the middle of housing estates and in the middle of various different things. But you don't see the same when you think about the Iron Age, right? Which is quite odd because you've got lots of Roman, like if you go to Neath, right, and there's 2 Roman gateways and just on the outskirts of Neath. And you go into the middle of Newport on the Isle of Wight, there's a Roman villa. And there's various bits of Roman remains underneath pubs and stuff in London and York and Chester. It's really odd. Yes. And I'm still doing my daily Roman video, which is on the Romans. And don't forget our live show as well, which is the first one's going to be the 22nd of February in Lampeter. Tickets are available still, and I'll put that down in the links down below. And Chepstow as well. And Chepstow on the 22nd of March, we actually do mention Culzean, and we mention some odd things about Culzean as well. So.
And there's not any there's not one at Abergavenny. There's not a live show at Abergavenny, is there?
We're still discussing that. It's unlikely it's unlikely that one will go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, go on.
I did notice someone was interested in your advertisement I put in for Estrid Gunless, and I thought she lives in Gilwern, and I don't know if Estrid Gunless would be not too bad or.
Yeah, no, Estrid Gunless would be fun because we got our full Mary Lloyd at Estrid Gunless.
Yeah.
The Mary Lloyd isn't available completely at Lampeter, but it will be making an appearance. But the Mary Lloyd will be fully on display at Chepstow as well.
Right.
So that there's 5 of us doing Chepstow, and there's 4 there's 3 of us there's 4 of us doing Lampeter, and there's 4 of us doing Estrid Gunless. So anyway, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Pat. Anything from you, Richard?
No, really interesting.
Good. And I'm just gonna, before I ask Goff, I'm just gonna make sure that we have done everything. I do believe. I'll come on to Goff now. There was something else. Basically, they were excavating at a site known as the Carns, which is on South Ronaldsay, which is connected to the mainland, and they've been doing lots more excavation work there. And on another island on the Orkney archipelago, they actually found, yes, on Holm Island in the Orkney archipelago, they found a complete array of human remains which haven't been disturbed in a 7-meter long passage tomb. Even though that's Neolithic, they might be able to understand a lot more about how things are changing, diseases and so on from an Orkney point of view. And that knowledge will then spread to other parts of Britain on how we understand disease played out in the Neolithic period, and if not later. So that's something else I wanted to mention. But more news about that again. We'll see how that goes. Right. Finally, let's see if Goff has got anything else to add.
Oh, it's very good. I was just thinking, probably you didn't go into it, but the so-called Iron Age doctors would be using the local plants and poultices and
Yeah.
to put on their patients as well. But maybe that I would have found that quite interesting. But that was very good.
Actually, I've got to say that there was last night. Strangely enough, we did actually mention some of that about plants. I'm just going to see why I didn't mention it tonight. There were a couple of things that we didn't go into tonight, but there were things that we went into tonight that we didn't go on last night. But I'm just going to double check where that is a minute. What's happened to it? Why we didn't do it? Right. Okay. You know what? To be fair, maybe I could add that in next week. Because I did mention a little bit about that because hang on a minute. Yes, I've got something here. Right, we'll just do this. We've got a tiny little bit of time. It's like what were they talking about? They were talking about in this thing here. They were talking about some familiar plants. But I don't think. Yeah, I tell you what. Let's not rush this now. If we looked at some plants that we use in medicine in the Iron Age, we'll put that in next week. That'll be very useful.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, excellent.
That's what we'll do.
No, I'm going to the other question. Very good. And I like this 7 o'clock start. It's good.
Yeah, I don't forget, Pat. Next week is 7 o'clock.
Okay.
We've got to make sure that we tell Henry and Dell. I don't know where Dell was tonight. He was here last week and a week before. Henry's still away, and he's probably having conversations with somebody in Iceland.
Yeah.
The Donalds.
I'm reading a book about Iceland. There was a murder. Yeah. There's been a murder, and they found a body in a cave.
And it's a book, so it's not real then.
Oh, a fog. No. A cave. Yeah, it's a book.
Oh, right. Yeah, fair enough.
It's just set in Iceland, and it was found in a cave on a lava flow. So, you know. Different.
It is different. I just wanted to add to that Star Wars is based on real fact when it says in a galaxy far, far away. It's based on fact. Did you know Earth is actually mentioned in the Star Wars thingamajig somewhere? Anyway, right. So, anyone else has got anything else to say?
Good night.
Does anyone want to say
then? Well, Goff, you've cut her off straight away. Okay, we'll see you next week. Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Thank you, Goff, Richard, Pat, Ruth, and Anne. And thank you very much for joining us tonight, and everybody online. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. And thank you very much for your support. Night, Anne. Right, and so I've got to say as well that we will be releasing now on we'll release it on YouTube, but in the next few days now, because we reached 200 people on our at the Walking Dead UK page on YouTube. We'll be releasing the next part of Wildfire Outbreak UK and we'll be releasing part 2 imminently, because we've actually got the 200 subscribers that we wanted to release the next part. So get on over to at The Walking Dead UK, and anyone would like to join my live show, we just discussed that tonight. That is available at Uhtred Gunlice, Chepstow, and Lampeter, and we might still be doing Abergavenny and Brecon, depending on who's interested and the bookings. Details are you can book on there at www.karl-james-langford productions.studio. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Gwelwch chi eto. And I am absolutely bushwhacked. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to look at the chat box. I might go to sleep now and have a quick snooze. Chat there. There's nothing in the chat on 3, nothing in the chat on 2, nothing in the chat on 1. Nothing on the chat on that screen. 1. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Nothing in that chat screen. 1. No chat there. No chat there. I'm sure there was something. No chat there. 1, 2, 3, 4. No chat there. And 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Done. Nos da chi. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Nos